think I've been asking the department for some facts and figures for some time. A number of constituents have raised concerns with me. A number of young people are not attending school, some for mental health reasons, some for physical health reasons, but also there are some children suspended or excluded from school. And I suppose the worry is when we got the facts and figures from the department previously that said over the 5 years to 2017 there was an 80% increase in the number of children out of school. The question is, what is the department doing about their education? How are they accessing the appropriate level of tuition? In terms of their ongoing career, how are they going to attain the necessary level of academic achievement that they need?
Going to that figure of a rise in 80%, do we have the numbers behind that? Do we know if that's a large amount of people, or are we talking a handful?
I think it's 1,100 over the 5 years. It went up from 650 to more than 1,100 suspension days per year. And that's broken down a little bit more. For instance, in 2018, the school suspensions and exclusions, there were 5 young people with more than 10 days duration, but the majority were around about 1 or 2.5 days, and there were 185 were excluded or suspended for 2 days.
So it certainly sounds like a significant amount of children out of school for a significant amount of times for various reasons. What resources can government be putting in place? Is that your question?
Well, that is the question, and it's anecdotally, again from constituents, I'm aware of some young people who are constituents who struggle perhaps with anxiety or other issues, or perhaps bullying, to attend school for a certain amount of time, and they attend Glencrutchery Road and they have a small amount of tuition. Another I'm aware of a very high achieving young person coming up to exam years. The department's providing a private tutor for a small amount of time to that young person. But we're talking rather a lot of young people. So for the majority of people, what level of education are they obtaining? And you'll see the later question, which I'm asking to be a written response, is how much, whether there is, I'm aware of a couple of cases when young people have not been able to return to school. For instance, if they've been expelled from a school or had to leave for any reason of education need or special needs, not been accommodated at any of the island secondary schools and have gone to private tuition or private school somewhere. What's the level of compensation perhaps that has been claimed back from the department for doing that? And in the meantime, what is the department paying out to privately educate the number of children who are not in mainstream education?
Is that a concern that we have here on the island that other jurisdictions might not have? Is the sense that with a limited number of secondary schools, if you aren't accepted to one of the 6, then you aren't accepted. There's an end point, I suppose, where in the UK it wouldn't be quite the same scenario.
Well, you may have noticed, I think, in the draft education bill, forthcoming new laws that the Department of Education is proposing, there's one measure that says in future head teachers will be compelled by the department to accept a child who has been permanently excluded from another secondary school on the island. Now, I'd be very interested to know what the education professionals feel about that particular measure. If that's being put into law because it hasn't been happening previously, how will that impact on the rest of the school population?
In your seeking to find out what government is paying out, firstly for private education for those people we've been talking about, as well as how many and getting the numbers of people in that situation, what would you like government to be doing? What's your ideal scenario for those people put in these pretty awkward situations?
I think it's ripe for a debate. I think we need to have a pragmatic, informed debate. What are the issues that we have? The Education Minister was in Keys last week, I think, saying that we have a wonderfully inclusive system of education here where we don't refer the naughty children to a separate unit. I've had some feedback from education professionals that perhaps that's something that we need to look at, just for the benefit generally, not as a permanent institution, but maybe somewhere for a period of time that people can go. partly for their own benefit, but also for the benefit of the wider school population. I don't know, I'm not an education professional, but I'm very willing to listen to and debate with people from all sides of the argument and the, with differing opinions on it. We want the best education we can provide on the Isle of Man for all students.
Do you have an idea, talking of those different arguments around this, I suppose, do you have an idea of how the schools, what their stances are on this?
I've heard different opinions, so I don't know what the mainstream thinking is. I think where I'm coming from, I'd like to hear more from the people at the coalface. I'd like to know what are the issues, and not just for people being suspended for whatever reason, but also young people with special education needs, and how are they being met? How are they perhaps with mental health or physical health issues where they're not able to attend school? How are their education needs being met? And what's the cost for that generally across the island? And if we've got such a large volume of young people being excluded from school, and I know the department said it's been working very hard to address that, and it's come down 30% so far this year. Well, how have they achieved that when they hadn't previously? But also, it still sounds like a large number to me. And if young people are repeatedly being excluded from school, it's going to have an impact on their education. Likewise, we've got the figures for the number of permitted absences and unauthorised. It's all part of a bigger picture. I think it would be welcome to have a debate on what's the best way to ensure the maximum number of young people get the level of education that they deserve.
Likewise, would you encourage any parents with children in any of the number of scenarios you've mentioned to get in touch with government or yourself or people to...
Yeah, I'd say get in touch with your MHK. I'm also perfectly willing to listen. Since I resigned, the Children's Champion, because I was unable to follow this was outside the remit of the new Children's Champion, sort of education for the broader population, but it is something that repeatedly I am being contacted about, and it's one of my areas of interest, I have to be honest, but I don't have the answers. I'm very grateful for anybody who contacts me with their story, particularly hearing a lot about special needs not being accommodated or to a level, and then we've had the issues with the lack of speech therapists going into schools now, supporting the younger age group, and not taking any referrals from stage 2 and above except for stammering. So I think the sort of broader picture of the struggle that some young people have attending school, maybe accessing education, that's of vital importance and is of huge interest to me, yes.